Sandra all the time is here with a cold hard truth. She's the ears and the eyes for me and you. Every day, everyone want to hear from Sandra. And every time on the air, she's getting better. Tell your sister, tell your brother, tell your mama, call Sandra in the morning and in the evening. They always calling Sandra. And when they start fighting, they calling Sandra. And
That's right, folks. Everyone is telling their mama about the cold hard truth. Welcome to another episode with more truth telling, more problem solving, and
we did step away from our cabinet titles and cabinet posts, but we are still very much your MPs. Which one of the updates that we wanted to provide tonight is that Parliament starts on Monday coming, the 9th of December, and we wanted to give public information as to the matters that will be raised in Parliament and where we'll stand on those matters. Just as a reminder, just if you could either put your cell phones on vibrate or silent throughout the meeting. Speak of the. So as mentioned, the government business in Parliament on Monday coming has the debate some 21 bills, 13 of which relate to one of my former ministries, financial services. And those are to deal with primarily financial services fees that will be raised or attempted to be raised in order to meet government expenses that are planned or anticipated in 2025. So they're mainly fees that are paid by business vehicles to the General Registry or to the Monetary Authority. Those bills, as published, did not meet the 28 days requirement for consultation under the Constitution. But as an opposition, within the opposition, we understood and we know that the government needs this for the public first, and we could justify and rationalize that these were indeed urgent, which is the only exemption to the 28 days public notice consultation period under the Constitution. There's a similar bill in relation to the information and communication technology validation bill to validate certain fees that have been charged in the past, but it's in doubt whether or not there was a legal basis to charge them. There will be a bill that proposes changes to the traffic amendment bill, which is trying to tackle road safety. There's also a bill in relation to changes for public transport. All of those meet the 28 days, well, exceed the 28 days consultation period, so they would fall naturally. And there's no dispute about those bills. The Attorney General will bring a bill in relation to the Misuse of Drugs Act, so there's an amendment bill there, which also meets the 28 days notice period. And then there are social development bills in terms of upgrading which was my former Ministry of Social Development, upgrading the Older Persons Act, the adoption legislation, and the children's legislation, and also the Maintenance Act. They provide for greater protection and safeguards for our seniors, for our children, and they also streamline and expedite adoptions. Anyone who's had any knowledge of an adoption or has experienced an adoption in this country, it can take quite a long time. And what this does is bring it in line with international standards and to be able to join families sooner, because a child that can be adopted faster into a home, more chances are that child leading a productive life. There's also the bills. There's also a government motion in relation to beneficial ownership transparency. This is forming a package of legislation that has been developed in quite some time throughout the Ministry of Financial Services to increase the transparency of who owns certain companies and who might have the access rights to be able to see on certain grounds the ultimate owners, the human beings behind companies. So this is to address not only international standards, but also to address the UK's considerations of wanting to increase access of the identity of folks who are behind our companies. Importantly, it seems from what I have read so far that the government is going to continue with the plan that was in place when I was minister, is that it has to be a legitimate basis to understand who are the ultimate beneficial owners. We hold the view that it is not constitutional for it to be a complete open Google search because the Constitution affords the right to privacy. So if the authorities are after a particular bad actor and have a legitimate interest to find out, that they can crack the case if they can get their hands on who's the beneficial owner, that has a public interest, but not just open season for anybody, because we do have the right to privacy in this country. After that, there are what may feature throughout the meeting are parliamentary questions, one of which in particular, maybe three of which are of particular relevance to West Bay.
Before I go into the parliamentary questions, I know that Andre is a very humble guy, but if you listen to a lot of the draft legislation that he just spoke about, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think almost every draft bill for financial services and social development, you have pretty much taken to this point of publication. Correct? But he isn't going to say it, but again, if you look at that alone, you can see all the work that he's been doing, up until this point. And excited to be able to support it when it gets down to Parliament. In relation to the parliamentary questions, one of the parliamentary questions that has been put forward from a district level, actually, I think that one was filed by you, relates to the dock down by Morgan's Harbor. And I think the question, I had it pulled up here earlier, but I lost it. It just relates to the questions around, you have it in? Yeah, straight here.
The question is to the Minister for Planning to confirm the timeline to completion for the Morgan's Harbor dock to be repaired, or not actually repaired, replaced with a concrete dock. When we were at the last or the prior finance committee, we specifically voted money to that purpose of replacing that dock with a concrete dock. So we know that the funds are available. The question to the minister is, what is the timeline to completion now that you have the funding?
And then the question that I have put forward to the Minister for Planning relates to apple blossoms. And many of you all, everybody in the district knows that it's not just an issue about, locating housing, but that particular area, the homes are now in a position where a lot of the residents are becoming ill from living in these homes. And we broke ground in May of this year, and they were promised that the homes would have been ready in December and that they would be able to move in for Christmas. And nothing has happened since the groundbreaking. So my question relates to what has caused this delay and what are the plans for the Apple Blossom project? Why is it that nothing has taken place to this point? There are some other parliamentary questions that were asked. They weren't
relating to the constituency. I did ask a question to the Minister of Sustainability, the new Minister for Sustainability, relating to the reason why the regen project or the dump project, why the termination, the notice of termination had been extended from the 31st of October to the 31st of December. So those are questions that we're going to be asking. I'm missing any other ones that relate to the district? Yeah.
After that, there'll be, in Parliament, there'll be debates on several private member motions. And my understanding is that there won't be a finance committee in relation to, in this Parliament meeting, for any supplementary funding. So from there, I think we want to take you through a few district updates. There's a few projects that we would like to either see be started or completed, one of which was the dock that I just mentioned. In addition to that, during back to school time, myself and Kathy went to the primary school, Don A. Cumber, to greet the kids and be able to wish them well and also provide and donate a few supplies. But we also spent significant time with the principal to ask what the needs are of the primary school. What our understanding is that the primary school has one of the largest student populations for a primary school on the island, is in need of expansion, is in need of more amenities and a playground, and seems to us to be underserved for the amount of population that it has. So we are really going to be pushing for and advocating for that school to receive more amenities and for an expansion to be there. Because as we mentioned at the Seafarers Hall, we're very happy for other districts to have upgraded facilities, but it needs to be equitable. And it does seem to be out of proportion that the Westbury Primary School, with the size of population, I think the principal might have mentioned 650 pupils. That's a lot of youngsters. And the thing is, when you go there, to see their faces, that they are so eager to learn. I confess I wasn't like that. I hated going back to school. You can ask him. But they were absolutely eager, and you could see that they're not aware of how much they're underserved. We really need to do better for them. In addition to that, one of the matters that was pushed for in the budget was to at least start that design plan for a West Bay primary school. So we were, high school, West Bay High School, edit. And we were, now that we're not with the government, we were eager to hear any sort of signs that this was going to continue. And what we can gather from the member for West Bay West public meeting is that that is going to continue. So we really need to get started with a high school in West Bay. It's long overdue. I think there was at least one or two groundbreakings already, two, one of which is in my Nana's name, and that hasn't gone anywhere. So we really need to get with it because the population in West Bay is continuing to grow. It also feeds into the traffic problem. It also disrupts lives. So we were heartened to hear that that plan is going to go forward because we really need to get started, which also includes the shelter because West Bay is also underserved in the amount of disaster shelters that are hurricane rated. From my understanding from disaster management, there are only two, the primary school and where you're sitting now. Otherwise, in West Bay, there's nowhere to run. Also, myself, and I was also heartened to hear that this is going to continue. And that's a credit to Cayman that hopefully our politics remains mature enough that good plans continue even if there are disagreements or there are reshuffles. That myself and the member for West Bay West, prior to our resigning, had our eye on a property, Crown property, to turn into a seniors community center. because there's also a lack of community centers in West Bay that seniors can go to in the middle of the day outside of a church hall. So from what I could gather from the meeting, or at least the reports from the meeting, that's going to continue. We think that that's a good thing. We're going to continue to push for that to happen, because at the end of the day, individuals are living longer, their minds are still sharp, and they can still contribute. And if you expand it further, there might be an opportunity, because it'll be placed near a preschool, for kids to come and learn from seniors who still want to have their minds engaged, who still want to contribute. Those opportunities for minds to be engaged at both levels, advanced age and young age, we need more community centers like that. So we will continue to push and be very vocal to show that that happens. We don't expect miracles for it to be built by the end of the term. We know that's not realistic, as long as the plans stay on track. And that is part of where you can be effective in opposition, to continue to follow up and bring pressure to bear to be sure that these projects happen in a way not necessarily that you can do sometimes from cabinet.
One of the other things that we wanted to do was, while we had everyone here, was to just remind everyone as we go into the Christmas season that we will be both hosting our Christmas events. And Andre's event is on the 17th of December at his usual, what's the name of the location? I know it's off Willa Farrington Drive. Yeah, everybody knows, off Dalkeith land. So he's having that from 5:30 p.m. So we want to encourage everyone to come out and attend that.
Can I make it sound a little bit more exciting? There's going to be cotton candy, there are going to be events, there'll be face painting, there's going to be food, there's going to be desserts, because we all have to remember, no matter what drama is going on, the reason for the season, the reasons are for us to gather, have fellowship, have fun as we proceed into Christmas. Then you have your event, so hype your own event.
Yeah. It's kind of funny to switch from talking about these serious matters to going into talking about what is really the, Christmas is all about getting together and remembering the reason for the season, and seeing each other that you don't see often. So you're right. Thank you for reminding me that it's not a mundane topic. So we are having our annual Christmas Carnival. We had it last year. It was a huge success. The children loved it. It is on December the 19th from, what time, ladies? 6 p.m. 6 p.m. And we are going to have lots of game stalls, hot chocolate stands, local food. It's going to be an evening to remember. One of the things we did last year was the kids played games, and just like any carnival, you play games, you get your tickets, and you get prizes. So we're looking forward to having everyone come out and attend. We'll also have a seniors corner where seniors will have a sit down area where they're going to have a nice meal. So it's going to be an evening to enjoy. So even though we, have gone through, I think everybody has had a year where, well, number one, it's hard to believe that we're already in December, but just a moment to sit down and enjoy some fellowship together. And
Now, just ask. Location.
Location is at the West Bay Heritage Park. So right behind the stadium, the Ed Bush Stadium.
You in West Bay, everybody knows it's Heritage Park. I guess that's for the folks maybe outside of West Bay. Somebody could look at us and say, well, if the two of you working together, why don't you have one event? We thought about that. But at the end of the day, and the criticism would be whether there are people who go to both and eat at both. So what? Life is stressful enough. I think more and more festivities is not a bad thing. So the fact that there will be people, I'm going to go to hers. I'll probably eat, I'm going to try to get to yours. I'll probably eat her food. But at the same time, it's Christmas. So we wouldn't want to get bogged down in that and just for political purposes have one. There's enough cheer that we can spread. Let's just go around and enjoy with everybody.
We want everybody to be able to enjoy these celebrations in their constituencies. Although we have the single member constituencies, we're still trying to bring the whole district together.
That kind of segues into something that we thought was quite positive that we've seen. We've seen a posting tonight that the Ponciana mental health facility will be opening. We hope that what we saw is accurate, because that was a point of contention in the government makeup that we just left. So the fact that however they were able to pull it off, and whoever was pushing behind it, we will congratulate that for getting done, because that's going to mean a lot to our people. There are people who are overseas that need to be brought back home. The country is suffering from a lot of mental health challenges, and I know there's a criticism that once that opens, it's full up and you got to try something else, but we have to get that open. So we'd be more than happy to take our hats off and say, thank you for getting that open. Whatever happened in the intervening weeks that made it happen, put politics to the side, the country needs it.
And to add to what Andre was saying, I think all of us see here in West Bay, just West Bay alone, we have many of our own people who have mental health issues, and we know they often tend to self-treat, right? So you can't deal with your mental health issues, so then you turn to drugs. And so you need to find a way to break that vicious cycle and get them the help that they really need. So it's good to see that that is going to be available very soon.
Going forward, so that takes us up until the end of the year. Going forward, we would anticipate, well, there's room, I should say, we can't speak for the government, but there should be at least room for one more parliamentary meeting, hopefully in January. And we also then will be considering and taking feedback as we're going around in the community to see what other matters that you would like press for before the term ends. I'm sure everyone is aware, but maybe it's worth repeating. The election has been scheduled for 30 April. The nomination day will then be at the top of March. So we are still going to push, even in those remaining months, for how much ever can get done before the campaigning really gets underway. Because at the end of the day, we're still MPs, we still collect the salary, we need to work for you all the way until the end. So with that, that gives a general overview of taking us up until the end of the year and the matters that we want to prioritize as the term comes to an end. But we want this to be an interactive meeting, so we'll open up the floor to any questions and take feedback, take notes, and be able to engage as a community. So if no one rushes up, we can have someone take the mic around.
I don't need a mic. My voice is loud.
We need a mic.
Sorry. Can you hear me? Hello? Okay. Just a basic a question about the cruise birthing referendum. Will that be addressed soon in Parliament?
From what I can see on the parliamentary business agenda that I took a part of today, that doesn't feature on the agenda.
Okay.
But that's not surprising in the sense that in order to bring that about, it requires a government bill. And government bills, as I mentioned earlier, under the Constitution, have to have 28 days notice. And that wouldn't be within, but that would be well outside that time frame.
Thank you.
not too good right now, Mr. Andre, so I can't start up there too long. But I want to come to the meeting all the same. Good evening, everybody. Now I just want to ask a question. With you all going into the school, was that a compulsory that you couldn't go? I mean, is it law that they find it to you about? Or they just didn't want you to go?
Well, the schools fall under, well, the Department of Education and the ministry. So we have to, anybody that wants to use any of the government facilities have to seek permission. So we sought permission and we were told that we couldn't use it. So we just complied with what we were told.
Okay, well, is some reason why you couldn't do it? I mean,
The reason we were given is that it was seen that they relied on the language in the policy that's used for when it's the election time and you're a political candidate, which we understand that when you're a political candidate, you're not allowed to use any of the government facilities. However, we're not candidates, so we really were of the view that we should have been given access.
that you could use it, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. About the getting some place down here in West Bay for the elderly people and all like that. Mr. Andre, I'm glad to see that you're going to push for that and get it done. I'm getting up there, so I'm not sure how long I'll be around, but it needed it down here. You got some people down here that's been in the house now for 40 years. They're talking about what it done, but I don't see anything they done. And I don't think you see anything they done. They should have done a lot of things. But anyway, I know you're going to do something. I know you're going to get something done. Another thing I want to ask you while I'm on the mic is you heard anything more about the beach up there? Please.
There was a recent Chamber of Commerce parliamentary luncheon where the Deputy Premier, also the Minister of Tourism, made some statements in that the government sees this as what was the word that was used? Environmental emergency, and that they were working on the matter. And there was a publication in one of the, I think it was in Cayman Compass. There's an article basically just going back over what he had said at the meeting. I don't want to misquote him, but it was in gist, it was that.
Okay, I heard that the people with the buildings down on the beach where it's messed up there, I hear they're suing the government for letting them put the building on the beach. I mean, to me, that is ridiculous. They should have had more sense than to do it to begin with, but the government shouldn't allow them to do it either. I agree with that. Not this government, I don't know which one it was, but anyway, I'm going to say this again. I went up there yesterday, or the day before might have been, and looked at this Royal Palm place there. Right now, sand wants to come back. It's coming back. You see the sand all in the water right up against itself. Wants to come back, But it can't come back as long as the water is coming up there. It's hitting that concrete, it's splashing and taking it back out. If you go by the Royal Palm, between the Royal Palm and the Seagull, maybe it's 60 feet wide or maybe a little more, I don't know. Where the sea could run all the way up, the sea had brought the white sand all the way up to the parkway or park cars for the beach. But the building down in front of that is in the water. Government, somebody got to come down on these people. They don't listen to these people with their foolishness no more. But they come in, mess the island up and tell us what must do. They got to make these people take them concrete off the beach. And if they take that off the beach, I bet you in 6 to 9 months, they'll have their beach back. But if they put sand there around that concrete, the first and rest will come, take the sand away again. It is pure stupidness. Nobody pumped sand on 7 Mile Beach to build this island. That's nature done that. And you know what happens when you play with nature? When you take from nature, nature come back for it. And they take, and nature takes 3 times as much. They're going to ruin the whole 7 Mile beach with that foolishness there because it's changing the flow of the water. It's changing the tides. I looked at it the other day. It's changing the tides. They're going to mess the whole place up. Believe you me. They need to make them look at the West End. Look at the governor's house. Look at the the Harbour House. Look at all those places. It ain't no erosion on the beach because they went with the rules, the law, and built up by the Jennifer line. You couldn't even build on the Jennifer Bush line. You had to build 60 feet back from that. And all those places are still good. I mean, you don't have to take no big scientists to see that. I don't know. I hope government don't take these people money. Our people, the people came and feel money. I give them people to fix up this thing, do nothing with that. Make them take their own money and take this thing off the beach, please. They need to do that. Government need to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hurston. I just want to just touch really quickly to say that while I was the minister, the information that was provided to me is that there had been a series of meetings. I think they called it a steering committee with a number of the different ministries, Ministry of Lands, Ministry of Planning, Tourism, Environment, and there was a number of things that were looked at. To your point, setbacks, high water mark, boundaries, and I just want to say that this is really what the Environmental Protection Fund was established for whenever there is a situation where you need to compulsory, you can't just say that you're going to tell people to move their walls, right? If it's past the line and it's in their boundary, government needs to be prepared to compulsory acquire it. So this is the reason why the Environmental Protection Fund was established in the beginning, and it really should be the purpose of what the fund is utilized for. But that was the studies that were done, and to your point, I do agree with you. My personal opinion is that if the walls are there, it will, based on the conversation, I'm not a scientist, but I've spent a lot of time with, especially with our local scientists while I was the minister, and having those walls there, as they explained to me, when the tides come in and the waves are harsh, the sand goes back very quickly if you have the walls. So you are right, sir. And I do hope to see that the matter is resolved.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for having the meeting. The last time you had a meeting here in this hall, I think it was the last time, you were announcing the issuance of the national ID cards. Can you shed any light on what happens with that?
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Yes, so that's actually one of the parliamentary questions that I have for the current Minister for Innovation, Deputy Premier Bryan, because that has been, as you know, a project for the entire term. So the legislation was passed in 2022, the Primary Act. The regulations, so that's the Primary Act, the regulations have been worked on and are in final draft form. The Department of, the eGov department has been working tirelessly on the technological aspects of it, the system, the card, the app that goes with it. So as far as the case was before I resigned, the department was ready to put forward through the ministry the draft regulations to go to cabinet so that they at least could get into an initial phase of volunteers to test the card at the end of this year, going into early next year, and make sure that the technology actually worked and then have it out for issuance. So the question that I have in effect to the current minister is, what's the timeline to the launch of the national EID? Because all of the elements, as far as I know when I was there, are in place or near in place.
So really nothing concrete at this point, and still subject to regulations being created, etc. Then.
Well, it's concrete in the sense that the primary act is passed. The regulations, as far as I know, are in final draft form before I left. And what is concrete is I've actually, with my own eyes, seen the technology, the actual ID card. I think the last radio Cayman broadcast actually showed the card itself on the radio. So all of those are concrete. It's just a matter of it being launched.
Okay, would you have any numbers on the high school students from the District of West Bay? How many students there are currently in high schools that are from the West Bay District?
Not off the top of my head, no.
I'm just wondering if the 50 million for a high school in the Barak might have been better allocated in West Bay.
And Mr. Schmidt, I'd argue if I could, but I can't.
And one final personal point. You said that 13 of the bills that are going to be considered in the next sitting of Parliament came from what was formerly your department or your ministry. Any chance of a bill being enacted that differentiates between local bank clients, in other words, everyday kind of people, versus people that are from other parts of the world and are dealing in international business, etc.? Because the burden that SEMA puts on the banks to put on us, the individuals, are quite onerous, to be very honest with you. I've been quite angry with the organization that I bank with for the questions they are asking, and that I didn't even think were legal of them asking because of the very privacy rights that you mentioned in your earlier comments. Thank you.
Thank you again. So the bills that are before the House only deal with the generation of fees on certain licensees. But they don't address that particular matter. However, what I can say is when I was remaining as minister, I've had that discussion with the Monetary Authority, SEMA, as it relates to due diligence locally. Now, there's two schools of thought. From the Monetary Authority's perspective, they say that they operate on a risk-based approach, and not all of what the bank is requiring is necessarily what they require. The banks, each individual bank might have their own process to do extra. If you listen to the banks say, well, it's all being required by SEMA. But I do think in the next term, we need to reconcile the issue which SEMA didn't fight me on. We do need to reconcile the issue of, is this gone too far? And there's much more pressure than is actually needed on the, not even just the local populace, even international, that if we have enough that we're satisfied that we know who the customer is there a need for it to be as stringent as it is? Particularly now that we're off of the gray list, doesn't mean that we should rest on our laurels, but it does mean that there should probably be some sort of a bit of a rebalance in terms of how much information is being requested.
He had his phone on.
Thank you and good evening. Minister, in the raft of financial bills that are being proposed, is there any mortgage act coming down the line?
So there aren't any mortgage acts that are in this legislative package. But as far as we are aware, when we were around the cabinet table, there is proposed amendments to the mortgage legislation that was being handled by the Law Reform Commission. The last report that I believe they gave caucus is that they've had 2, maybe 3 rounds of consultations with the Bankers Association, and the legislation should be near final. We haven't actually seen that published since we've left, and I don't think it was on the table to be published. But that is a good question for us to pose during this meeting. May not be able to, the deadline for parliamentary questions is come and gone, but somehow maybe we can make a comment, maybe within the financial services bills, as to where is the government on that piece of work, because we do know, I remember the caucus presentations, that the consultations and the Ministry of Lands was working on it because mortgages falls under lands.
I'd like to add to that. I actually was working in the Law Reform Commission before I ran for public office. So I'm very familiar with the reform for the mortgage scheme or regime, whatever you would like to call it. The one thing I'd like to say to the public, and this is one of the things that I have really been passionate about, educating more. I talked to a lot of my constituents about it. It is public consultation and feedback from members in the community. Now, I saw firsthand, because I worked on that majority of the people that responded was the banks. And basically what we were asking was, do you feel the law needs to change to protect the consumer? And very few, I think it was, honestly, it was less than 5 homeowners from the whole entire island that responded. And that was because they had experienced foreclosure or whatever the case. So of course, the bank's response was, we don't really feel that anything needs to change. Everything is going along fine. So it was a definite eye-opener for me that the people of the country need to engage with the government, and MPs need to do their part as well with getting the public, maybe it's just a generic response to say, hey, we feel this needs to be changed, or we're supportive of you looking into this. And there's some topics that might come forward that are not reflective of what the Caymanian people would want. And again, we don't think this is something that would be reflective of, the views and the beliefs of the Caymanian people, and put it in. And so I would encourage everyone right now to go on to the Law Reform Commission website. There are a few matters that they are asking the public for their feedback on, and it would be important for you to look at it. And all you have to do is send a one-line email or a letter to say, I support this, or I agree with this. If you don't understand, reach out to your MP and ask, what does this mean? What are these changes going to do? So I just wanted to chime in on that, because again, the people of the country have a whole lot of power.
Well, thank you very much for that, MP. As you know, the banks wouldn't say it's a problem because it's a demand loan. I mean, they can call it under the terms of their agreement, but loosely they call it a mortgage, which we know is not the case. It would seem to me that countrywide, although I don't vote in either of your constituencies, but my neighbor's string is about 200 yards away or less. That we need to really get on board the district committees or the district councils. Now, mention was made earlier that you were refused access to the schools on the basis as you articulated. However, in the Constitution, it makes mention of the district councils. So if we are to implement district councils, where are we supposed to meet? Would it not be in the schools? Now, I can distinctly remember, times have changed, but I can distinctly remember in the 70s, the West Bay Town Hall was where the campaigning was. I mean, I was perched on my bike as a teenager, but times have changed, yes. Now, going into a bit of planning, I had the opportunity yesterday to visit the Central Planning Authority on a proposed project out here at the Four-Way. It was quite a grandiose scheme. And I hadn't been before that CPA for some years. And I was quite alarmed that the seating arrangements there were changed from 5 or 6 years ago when last I was there on another matter. It seemed to reduce the opportunity for public participation. It almost seems like it's by design, how they have oriented the actual room. So this needs to be looked into. Continuing on with planning, the other issue was, someone said to me after I spoke to them what I had observed, that they wonder whether this isn't part of the problem we're having with overdevelopment, because there's no quote-unquote resistance from the local people in regards to having their voices heard. Now, I was quite alarmed that the Central Planning Authority these days does not have a legal counsel on the CPA board. Now, when I mentioned it to the chairman, he said that I must take it up with the minister. Now, to my mind, that's a quasi-judicial body. That is his remit, to go to the minister and ask for his resources that he needs. Now, those of us who've been to court or know a little bit about the legal framework, there's a terminology called the equality of arms. So if the Central Planning Authority does not have a legal mind on board to interpret the legislation, a developer, high-powered developer with a raft of lawyers can get basically what they want. So these are serious issues, and I would like to just conclude by saying that as the Cayman is sophisticated, and with growing sophistication, we must address things differently. To my mind, we have reached a stage where district councils need to be in place, and subcommittees or committees of the district councils need to be allocated to approve or disapprove planning at the district or constituency level. We, the Central Planning Authority, should be at the macro level, dealing with areas like sustainability, your erosion issues. But when it comes to a project at the 4-way, where we have a protected heritage area, and there was representations made that the National Trust never had any standing, to my mind, we need to take this another step forward. Thank you very much.
Just before you go down, a very, very good suggestion. Thank you very much. Legal counsel and the district councils have an approval process, because as an extension of your point, what we're seeing in the district is stormwater management. When one area is developed, which used to be the catchment area for the water, water finds the path of least resistance. So somebody's yard who didn't used to flood, when I drive by, there's a few areas now, there's one down Peace Lane. I remember campaigning in 2021, it didn't flood. So then you drive down it and you're like, well, how is behind here flooding? Because I swear this didn't happen. When you develop in one area, and that used to be the catchment area, the water is gonna go somewhere. It follows the path of least resistance, and in some other area floods. This is another extension of your point in terms of planning and development, that I think we need a much more site for stormwater management. So thank you for your suggestion, sir. Darren?
Good evening again. MP Andre, I have a question that you may be able to answer. Although you no longer wear the financial hat, can you say what legislation dictates that the rate of interest Cayman banks use must be tied to the US federal interest rate? And if there is such legislation, I think that should also be addressed because our dollar is stronger than the US dollar. We are a much more stable economy, both politically and any way you look at it, than most of the entire United States. We have no war threat. They're engaged in war around the world constantly, presidential assassinations. If that country stumbles, the saying is, if America gets a cold, we start sneezing. So transform that now to the financial industry and the banking. If their dollar crashes or if their interest rate goes sky high, why must ours follow suit? Why aren't we isolated or something? I mean, can you clear my head, because I'm trying to figure out the reason for that.
But we don't have a central bank like many independent countries that have their own currencies and monitor their currency fluctuation. So I believe the thought process when the policy was put in place, which is many decades ago, is to fix it to the US, because given the link in the US, is your mic on? Given the link between the US, now there are further afield, there are other currencies. So anybody, I don't want to bore people, but anybody heard of the BRICS? Where there are other countries with other currencies. So it is something to take a look at in the future, because I can't say that at the time it didn't make sense when the policy was introduced. The other thing that has come up in the House is whether or not we should also have a body to establish our own rates. You don't have to necessarily be an independent country to do that. I think, if I'm not wrong, Bermuda has its own body that sets its own rates. But that has to be looked at carefully, because there's been examples in other jurisdictions where the US has gone one way, but then the independent body in your country didn't go when it was favorable to the consumer. And then people say, well, who pointed them to that board? Shouldn't the rate be going down? You got to be careful you wish for it, that it don't backfire. But it is something to consider going forward in the future, because the economy is much more sophisticated than us. We're doing much more business with other international countries. So it is something to consider. I don't think that's going to get solved before the 30th of April. But I do think it's something that we have to look at as the future of financial services.
It's a policy that it's not written in a law somewhere. It's a policy. Oh, no, I said, so it is more of a policy. It's not a law. It's just a policy that's followed and that was basically some years ago that just continues on then.
Yeah, under the Monetary Authority Act and its policies, it's there, but it can be changed. But that has to have considerable thought, because you could change and it sounds good and then it backfire on you.
Thank you very much.
Honorable Andre Ebanks and Honorable Katherine Wilks, the audience, and the listening audience. A pleasant good evening. I'll begin with a question. To the best of my knowledge, North Side and Easton has a civic center. And I'm here thinking that the District of West Bay should have had one long ago, and we are in dire need of one. We've had the scenarios played right here multiple times this evening, beginning with you as our West Bay representatives wanting or needing a place to have your meeting that had to take place in Prospect. Also, there are other reasons why we need a civic center in West Bay. For example, the NPO organizations, the multiple different community organizations, when they need to gather and have a meeting, we absolutely have nowhere to go. And the schemes of housing, unfortunately, everyone is not a homeowner. And one of the big concerns currently is for young people that do wish to have a home with the banking fees. And then there's a majority of others that have to rent. And I'm thinking our island desperately was in need of a rental board for quite some time. So this is something I'm highlighting because this is something I would like to see implemented. The other one, Miss Honorable Andre, I will ask that you kind of bring me up to par in some clarification of something you said previously in regards to social development and the project of adoptive parents. Could you expound on that for me some more? Because being very well aware within the community of the Cayman Islands, more so West Bay, which is my district quite naturally, I'm very well aware that there has to be some huge changes in that area, social development. So I congratulate you there as well. Last but not least, about a week or two ago, we had a fiscal report from the OAG. I don't know how many of you have read it, but I have read it. I'm speaking primarily to the audience and the listening audience. I've read it twice. The first time, Honorable Andre, I was in awe and in total shock. I mean, the concern of our fiscal status in these islands is huge. So if you could expound there for me, or for us, that will also be appreciated. Thank you.
I think we'll both respond to your questions in part. In relation to the residential and tenancies issue, there is a draft bill which is ready to go. And it was at the last sitting of Parliament, the sitting before that, it was anticipated to have been published in time for that Parliament, but there was a change of plans and it didn't get published. And there, as he just listed the agenda, it hasn't been published again. But it would address the concern that you raised. What it would have done is it sets out to establish, I think it's called a commissioner or a commission, which then monitors any landlord and tenants disputes. So of course, there's an accountability element for both parties. So there's also protection that would be put in place when that legislation is published and hopefully passed. And then just to touch quickly, which I know Andre might also elaborate on it, your point about young people needing to be able to afford to acquire property. There was, many of you might remember, I think it was referred to as the GGHAM program that was in place many years ago. And it has now been rebranded and called the HOME program. But to my knowledge, I don't believe that has been, I think, I don't want to overspeak, but I know that it's something that the minister had announced, but to my knowledge, it has not been about it by tomorrow morning.
Thank you, Honorable Ebanks-Wilks.
In relation to the adoption legislation. So the bill seeks to advance and streamline adoption. It will, in effect, create two different types: those that can be expedited by the adoption board and those that must go to the court. Because right now it's a very onerous, slower process. That was when the legislation was first developed, I believe, in the 60s. Quite a lot has happened since then, and the legislation has never been overhauled since. So this is the first major overhaul of the adoption legislation in our history to address the speed in which adoptions can occur. And then in relation to the OAG report, yes, we're still studying that ourselves because it goes to the root of some of our concerns in terms of fiscal prudence. Yes, certain things need to be spent and you need enough in the budget, but you also have to look at both sides of the coin, that you also have to be mindful of how much is being spent versus how much of the income is coming in to pay the bills. So at the rate that we are seeing spending and things that can be done for less was that factored into some of our reasoning for moving away, because we thought that we'd be better serve the public in a larger majority opposition role than be in the cabinet that's continuing to spend, and the spending continues at a pretty concerning rate. So yes, your point is valid. And then to tie your point with a few other points that have been mentioned earlier, with an overall development plan. You can hear it through the questions. If you tie it all together, the rate of development, where you can build, who can build there, who can afford there, we still have not gotten to grips in this country. It's one of the large endeavors that has to be cracked in the next administration, because you've got young persons who have done everything we've asked of them, gone to school, got their degree, got experience overseas, and cannot afford to buy property in the country. That's one of the PQs that I have, is that there was a motion in the House, in the last House sitting, of how you were able to reduce or remove some of the restrictions for first-time Caymanian buyers, because we should be proud of the fact that young people now are attracting salaries that can actually purchase these properties, but they need a break. All of it feeds into the overall issue of the cost of living in the country and how we are going to develop in the future to retain it for our people.
Thank you, Honorable Andre.
Good evening, everyone. I'm glad that you mentioned that, Andre, regarding young people and home buying. I think another issue that young people have been talking a lot about is the environment. And these are two questions from Sustainable Cayman that we'd like to maybe have some clarification on. Regarding the National Conservation Act law, there has been a lot of talks of amendments. Could you provide any clarification of what those amendments are?
The bill has not been published, so we are unable to elaborate on that at this stage. However, back to the parliamentary luncheon just the other day, the Deputy Premier did indicate that it would be published. So we'll just have to wait until that time. I'd love to share with you what is there, but if they intend to publish it, the public will eventually find out.
But just to clarify, it's not to say that when we were in caucus, as we mentioned at the Seafers Hall on the 13th of November, it's not to say we haven't seen an iteration of it. I think what MP Kathy is getting at is that she doesn't want to misspeak, and then what's actually published differs from what we say here tonight, because they could still change it. But what we did see is that there were amendments, proposed amendments, to various sections throughout the act. How extensive the actual bill, if it's published, it may never be, or when it's published, what it exactly looks like is a wait and see.
Thank you so much. On the same conversation regarding the NCA, the NCC had their general meeting yesterday, and there was discussion about nominated protected sites being put forward. However, there seems to be an issue that Cabinet might be slow at approving these protected sites for nominations. If you could provide insight as to why there seems to be a lack of urgency.
I think I spoke about that at the earlier meeting that we had, but just for the benefit of those who are here, the long and short is that Cabinet makes decisions based on a majority vote or a consensus, whatever is agreed upon. But again, it depends on the majority of the members in Cabinet. So you can't, I can bring a paper as the minister to propose a protected area or a conservation plan. But if it doesn't get the majority votes, it doesn't move forward. So that is the reason why those haven't been put in place.
Thank you.
I just want to check with the tech folks. How are we doing on time for the stream? How much do we have left? 10 minutes? 15? Okay.
Sorry, very quickly, someone messaged me. They must have heard my questions. And they wanted to also add that the zone, the coverage area that one is allowed to object to planning was altered in the early 2000s. And this needs to be opened back up. Because right now it's only about 500 feet or something like that. Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
So I guess in just to that, the planning law needs to, when the law reform, it's probably one of the areas my personal view is I'd like to see the Law Reform Commission looking at some of our current legislation in areas that it could benefit from reform. And this is a perfect example where, need to look at laws like the planning law and how it can be modernized to ensure that, like you said, issues such as objections aren't overlooked. I've heard, and I'm sure many of you in the room have seen, what do they call the objection letters that come through the mail. By the time you get it, the time has already passed. So certainly things that we need to kind of modernize the way in which some of the notifications are even received. So certainly something to make notes of for the future.
Good evening. My question is with regards to minimum wage. I want to know, what are the plans to bring back Caymanian protection law? Why was the minimum wage committee only members of well-established companies in the Cayman Islands who are comfortable with paying CI $6 or less to attract work permit holders or people who cannot survive as Caymanians in their own country? The second one is, why was no consideration for government departments who work daily with struggling Caymanians to sit on the committee to have a fair fight to protect the well-being of Caymanians and their families in their own home country? And why did the law pass for, I just want to know about the minimum wage.
So the selection of the committee at the time was approved by Cabinet, but designed by the then minister, who was given the flexibility to put forward the committee that he thought was best at the time to address the issue. Now, you and I have spoken about this before in terms of other relevant departments to contribute to it. Our understanding is that even though you wouldn't have a large committee that necessarily all the departments would be on, but there would be consultation with those departments so the feedback would actually be fed in. But putting that to the side, you're still raising an important issue that still needs to be addressed because it's tied to the cost of living. If the wages aren't high enough for you to actually afford to live here, the country needs to raise the minimum wage. As far as I remember, the Chamber of Commerce wrote a letter as to the amount and the level that would be acceptable by the businesses across the board. That now needs to actually be put forward and be dealt with so that you can raise the minimum wage and try to one avenue in which to address the cost of living.
Question. Good evening. Question. What are the requirements for a road to have speed bumps? Can you tell me? Okay. Why I brought this up? I live on Mount Pleasant, and that has become like a racetrack in the last few years. There's more accident happening on Mount Pleasant compared to all of West Bay. Between Leona Lane and the Bird Sanctuary is the most narrowest section of Mount Pleasant. And constantly there are accidents. There are some people here that lives nearby me, and they can attest to that. It's just a couple weeks ago, a car was turning into an apartment complex, and he was run from the back, spun around, and that person ran into my land, knocked down my trees. Okay, I can stay in my room and hear the racing down Mount Pleasant Road. I mean, literally racing. Over the period of years, I've lost 2 dogs and 1 cat because of speeding. No, doesn't that require a speed bump? Wouldn't that require us to have some speed bump? It's dangerous. Leona Lane to the Bird Sanctuary. Some people here can attest to that. So I'm asking for the safety of us who live on Mount Pleasant Road, if we can have some speed bump. I see speed bump on Northwest Point. Isn't that a major road more than Mount Pleasant? I see other major roads has speed bumps. So why can't we? We will be saving lives. I tell you, it's scary. It's scary.
Very good question. And to answer it, I will let you know that the Mount Pleasant Road is a road that I have raised with the minister shortly after being elected, especially the area that you speak of, because there's a sharp corner. Right. And we know that there's a lot of accidents happening right after you pass the bird sanctuary, to the point where the residents we had to install a guardrail because people were running into the yard, and again, putting those homeowners at risk. What I was told is that there is a bigger long-term plan for that area where they do plan to widen the road, and some of the landowners were contacted by the Department of Planning, I think long before this administration, where they were asked to, I think some of the land was compulsory acquired so that the road could be widened. So I know that it is a plan to widen the road. And in relation to the speed and the speed bumps, I've asked for the Mount Pleasant Road in general, because not just in your area, but there's also a lot of speeding on the other corner, which is coming from MacRuss. So you have the residents in the MacRuss area, where there's a lot of blind spots where they're coming out of their roads, and so it is a concern. But again, all we can do is continue to put the request in and just wait for our turn.
Thank you so much. It's needed real bad.
And just to touch on that point, there's 2 areas in particular in West Bay South that I'm concerned about, which is Reverend Blackman. And if you're coming out of Powell Smith and Papa Top is on your right, it is very difficult to get out on any given day. That one keeps me up at night to Tucker. Tucker. I say Tucker. What do you say? Tucker. But I hear some people say Tuka. I say Tucker. It winds, and if you follow me, you know where Sunburst Lane is? Before the Meadows new apartment? When you're trying to come out of Sunburst Lane, you really have to be watching both ways because there's a blind spot, and if you don't come out quick enough, you can get hit. So you need some traffic calming measures there, and also on Reverend Blackman and what to do at the junction of Reverend Blackman and Powell Smith. Because I don't want to jinx us, but it's a matter of time before there's a major accident there. I've put in a request, I don't know if you got a call, but I got a call from NRA board, and I put in a couple of requests, and those are in.
One of the suggestions that we'd made about the junction by Reverend Blackman Road by Papa Top was just a simple four-way stop. So there are ways to address it, and so we're just waiting for the solution. Just a four-way stop is all it's needed, 4 stop signs.
Hello, excuse me. I want to ask a question into the public, really. You all think we have enough building in the Cayman Islands as it is? Because they're not building for Caymanians anyway. We have more than we need, right? Well, what I would suggest, and I hope I hear more people say this, is that we would try to get them to stop all buildings, shut down all the construction now. And that means sending a lot of people back to the country. Will ease us up a whole heap. And we got two I don't know call not say that, but we got 2 different countries with the people here. A lot of them is on work permit. I don't know how many countries it is on work permit, and you got a lot of 100 more than that is not under work permit, not got no permit. I think we need to get them out of here. Would be a lot better because the few Caymanians that's left here, it looks like they're putting us on a reservation, like the Americans did with the Indians. And I would like to know, though, if they're going to do that, where is the land they put us on? We don't want a swamp land.
Good evening. I have 2 questions. One of them is immigration reformative. It's about developers that is keeping on employees without permit. They should be held liable. Break down to the letter.
You say without a permit?
Without permit. And the second question is the bank's customers is giving you a check and the bank would not want to change it for you. So what can you do on those matters?
So on the first point, as far as I know, if you're holding on and actually employing somebody without a work permit, that's illegal. But this goes back to what Darren is talking about, enforcement. But actually enforcing the laws that are already on the book. I don't think you need a rewrite of the law for that. That's already, as far as I know, illegal. On the second point, in terms of do you mean you do not have an account at the bank that you're trying to cash the check? Can you just repeat the question, make sure I understand the circumstance?
The bank customer issue you a check, and because you do not have a permit, have a bank account with them, they refuse to change that check.
So that relates to where you don't have, you the receiver of the fund. And you don't have an account at that bank. Right, so that the bank is then saying, well, they don't know you and to distribute the cash to you because you're not their customer. One of the features that, to tie back to Mr. Schmidt's point, he might have been gone now, with the digital ID, was to get the banks more comfortable with the due diligence so they actually know who they're dealing with and to be able to establish a bank account so that you'd be able to have the bank account and then avoid the problem.
I understand that point. Even though you show your ID, they refuse to change that check for you. But at the same time, they don't realize that their customer is violating you because of issuing that check, not issuing it as a direct deposit to your account.
In that scenario, I'm curious, why is the person who is the sender not doing the direct deposit? You mean you have a bank account elsewhere?
I have a bank account elsewhere, but you issue me a check saying Scotia, and Scotia will refuse to have it because you are not a customer of them.
But why isn't the sender just sending it to your bank account?
Just to create a problem.
Yeah, because either way, there's a fee whether you cash the check or not. So that sounds something that could be easily rectified by the sender just sending it to your account.
Anytime they issue me a check and they do it like that, I go back to them and say, listen, every time you send it back, I'm going to charge you $100. No, that's...
How are we doing on time? Because we just have some closing comments. And then usually what's customary at our constituency meetings, I save time off the mic for people who have private concerns that they want to discuss before it gets too late. So we'll take maybe one or two more questions, two questions, and we'll have some closing comments, and then we'll socialize.
Good evening, everyone. Honorable ministers, MPs. Just quickly, I live in Mount Pleasant and have lived there for older than this child here. And I remember a time when 6 o'clock in the morning, I was going through the dikes to get to school in town, or eating porridge, and I'm coming in here and the husband's driving the car. We're almost getting back there, right? So to your mention about the high school, that was supposed to happen. The sisters were supposed to get to go to that school as well, and they're all officially aging out of the system as of next year. So we will never have enjoyed the benefit of that. I hope the future will. In terms of the schools, to keep it on the table for the busing of the children, especially from the private schools. Look at what Cayman looks like when it's a school break. The stress is ridiculous on the roads, and that's why people are taking all these chances. But there's another thing I want to consider is that having a high school in the district means the children possibly could not have to be standing up at 6 something in the morning on the side of the road. Cayman is also not the seaman anymore. We don't know everybody that's here anymore. We have probably moved a little bit away from looking after each other because we're so much in a rush. And I really am concerned sometimes with seeing the age of the children that are standing on the side of the road. I'm seeing West Bay primary students on the side of the road as well. We can't say that we haven't had some level of crime here that have reached our shores finally. I don't want to go all the way into that. But I'm really concerned when I'm driving out with my children in the safety of my car that I passed a neighbor whose child has to stand on the side of the road to catch the bus to go to town or even to West Bay Primary. They're at risk of collisions, the accidents. They're at risk of other harm that could come to them because their parents are either having to make decisions in the best interest of the family and whatnot. So I would make a suggestion that unfortunately, and I don't know that much about it, I could be corrected, that the time when the children are on the side of the road, it's probably when the police are also changing shift. So the presence is not there. So I would suggest that they work it out, that when the kids are standing on the side of the road, that the patrol vehicles are actively driving along those pickup points for their protection, not only from traffic, but from human harm, if you understand what I'm saying. Remember now, my children don't have that risk. So why can't we protect our own like how we used to? The other thing is in the area of Reginald Parsons, which is passed by the Garrett Church and the new Montessori School, Sometimes I think it's like a racetrack. You can hear the engines, right? Don't make the gray hair fool you. Yes, I'm Asian, but I understand what it is to live in this country. I understand what it is to be young. I understand what it is to have a powerful vehicle and whatnot. But I don't understand why we have to trade on our tradition and our values when my master bedroom window is vibrating at 6 a.m. on Sunday morning. Do we not have noise ordinances here in this country? And I don't want to be that old fogey that is the one complaining, but I'd like for some respect to be retained in the country so that we understand that if that was happening Saturday night at 11 o'clock, that it's almost acceptable because that's party time. You know, even Cayman has allowed that over the years. At 6 o'clock on Sunday morning, that's ridiculous. Yeah. Thank you very much. I come in.
Oh, like. Testing. Okay. Evening, everyone. Is there any plans to create a department within DH or DOA to clean up garbage and roadkill on a daily basis? I have one more question after that, but you want to answer that one first?
Not that I'm aware of, but it's a very good idea.
Agreed. Also, will there be a more consistent effort to have potholes filled in a time-appropriate manner? I kind of tired of hitting potholes on a regular basis. I feel like everybody might feel the same way too.
Yeah, especially when you drive like
Was
me,
early.
and when you try to miss them, you actually go in them.
Right.
But the approach to the potholes is also very similar to how we deal with putting in a speed bump request. Most MP offices will send an email to the NRA team, indicate where the potholes are located, and they'll usually send. The potholes are usually addressed fairly quickly, so you can just reach out to one of the MPs or you yourself. I mean, MPs are there, and that's one of the things that we do. And I just want to say that I want to shout out, especially to one of my constituents who just recently retired, Mr. Rolando, who was always, I mean, I think every time I saw him, he was patching up a pothole. So that's something that can easily be addressed. The potholes are much easier than trying to get a speed bump put down or getting a road repaved or so forth.
Well, can we push for maybe the...
What road are you talking about? Down by Andresen?
Gee, everywhere. Everywhere. Okay, thank you, sir. But can maybe you guys push for the daily cleanup of the roadkill and the garbage cleanup? I know we do a yearly thing where they clean the road, but I think it should be more of a daily, consistent, or a weekly. It could actually be a job, a profession, not profession, but a career or something.
It is a program that takes place in Cayman Brac where they have something that's set up, and it was something that we were looking at trying to implement here in Grand Cayman. But there have been some delays with doing that. Before I go any further, I just want to also highlight Mr. Benny, who is here, who also works very hard, Benny Wells, on our roads.
You want to get?
All right, Darren will close us off, and then we have a few closing comments because the food getting cold.
Thanks for the time. I just wanted to touch on something that came to my mind when the lady behind me was talking about the schools. And it's something that I've noticed over the last several years. I've noticed that with the middle school year, I noticed that there's this big influx of the kids graduating from John Gray going into middle school, but they go straight to the high school and they're intermingling with older kids. So you have the very young middle school age kids, first time middle schoolers, interacting with the older children. And it's not too often good changes, bad. Most of the time, it's something that it can be considered in the future with building these new schools, if they could go back to separating the middle school children, to give them 3 years with their own pairs on their own, to try to save the next generation coming, because we're going down a slope and it starts with the kids. Thank you.
Hey, Darren, good suggestion as usual. So now we'll just have some very brief closing remarks, and then we'll socialize, and anyone who has any sort of private concerns, we're going to hang around.
Thank you. I would really just like to thank all of you who came out tonight to ask questions, hear what we had to share on where we're at in terms of district updates, updates with Parliament, and then just to bring you up to speed on all the other matters that have been ongoing. For me, I find it a true joy and privilege to hold this high office and be MP for the District of West Bay and the people of West Bay Central. And I also find it an honor to work with Andre. One of the things that we are certainly aligned on is that we both continue to fight for you, the people of Cayman, because I said it before and I'll say it again, Cayman needs to work for Caymanians. And we are living in paradise, yet we can't enjoy it. And you can't enjoy it. And I'm praying that we get to a place where we're making decisions that benefit you, the people of the Cayman Islands. And I have all confidence that as I continue to work with Andre and really just work for that. In my dream, or to retire here because it's too expensive, we see those people coming home because they feel Cayman is now where I need to be. My country is now a place for me. So that's where I'm at, and I just want to say thank you all. And I want to thank Andre. He has, especially after I left being the speaker and took on the role of a minister, I didn't really have the benefit that most of the ministers had because they'd been ministers for 2.5, 3 years. So I certainly gained a lot of guidance and support from Andre, and I just want to thank him. I don't think I've ever publicly thanked him for that, and just for your support, especially while we navigated with some very difficult topics such as the National Conservation Amendment Bill, and all other matters that we navigated through. But I just want to say thanks, and I will hand it over to him so that he can do his closing remarks.
Oh, shucks, cuz I didn't know you were going to do that. You make me blush. Thank you. It's also an honor and a privilege to work with you as well. We certainly learned a lot on this journey, and it's not over yet. But the more that we began to work together, collaborate, put our heads together, I think we can continue to do good for the country. I also want to thank all of you. Your time is valuable too. All of you who listen online and all of you who are here in attendance, thank you for attendance. It's good to see a packed hall. Good to see so many West Bay faces. I don't want to hold you up from the food, so I'll make this brief. It probably one more, I would say, public meeting that we'll have in January. And then after that, you can imagine, a lot of you have seen lots of election cycles. It will get underway and the pace will quicken. So I believe that we'll probably have at least one more in January. But I want all of you to know, and I think I speak on behalf of both of us, it's an honor to serve you. It was an honor to be ministers. That decision that we made, I'm sure all of you can appreciate, was not easy. It was a sleepless night. But in our judgment, don't want to rehash it. We said what we had to say at Seafarers Hall. But at the end of the day, we thought we were in a better position to protect the country and future generations, to be in the opposition and challenge the government on certain issues. And there isn't that much time left. We miss our projects. We miss the civil servants that we worked with. We miss serving in that capacity to serve you all, but we're still here for you. And our mission now is to try to find like-minded individuals that we can create a coordinated team of careful minds to tackle the large issues. Yes, there have been pretty significant and important individual goals that have happened, but the large projects where you need the entire team have not happened. We already spoke about them tonight. They've been spoken about for election cycle after election cycle. Development reform, immigration reform, cost of living. We are on a mission to try to find a committed team of individuals that are coordinated, that will put country interests above self-interest and take this country to the promise that it can reach. It is not over. Hope is not lost. I wouldn't be here. She wouldn't be here if it was. We can make a better future for the generations behind us. We've got kids we have to answer to, and we need a Cayman that their kids can be proud of. So God bless you all, and stick with us on this journey.